Good evening. I'm Glenn Lowry, Director of the Museum of Modern Art, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this conversation with Rashid Rana. This is Frieze Week, and it's terrific to see so many of you, but I also know that Rashid's fan club is global in its strength. I'm thrilled that Rashid was willing to take a moment out of his time to talk about the Lahore Biennial. As many of you know, Rashid is not only a well-known and celebrated artist, he is also the dean of a very important art school, a curator, and now the founding artistic director of the first Lahore Biennial. So I want to begin with a very simple question. On the surface, Rashid, you look like a sane man. You have a great artistic practice. You're admired by many people. You're a renowned teacher. Why would you take this on?
My wife and you share the same views. Well, you don't have a choice when you're living in South Asia and similar parts of the world. You have to take on multiple roles, simply. And since there is no other thing which is straight anyway, starting from the sense of time, it's all non-linear. So one is better off not taking any prescriptive route. So you see how things come your way, and that's how you decide. So I wasn't seeking necessarily any future or career in curation, but I think this is going to be my third curatorial project that I'm undertaking, so let's hope where it takes me.
Tell us a little bit about your first two projects, curatorial.
The first one was also was incidental. Devi Foundation, a show called Resemble, Reassemble, curated for Lekha and Anupam Podar. The way it came about, I got to know them as friends, and I was surprised to know collectors in India, because we don't have such collectors in Pakistan who would not necessarily acquire work to match with their curtains. So I was very impressed that he was buying totally uncollectibles. So that encouraged me to invite him to Pakistan. See the exciting work being produced by young artists and around the academia that exists in Pakistan, but without any commercial art infrastructure. So you do need that kind of support. So they came, 3 visits, and they built this amazing collection of cutting edge, sort of artwork. And they asked me if I would like to curate that. I said, no problem. It's only later on when I started working on it, I discovered the challenges of it. And found myself in a situation having to curate a national survey show, something that I, in my mind, always opposed. I did participate in national survey shows. I will take the opportunity. But in principle, I do think that the format is problematic. In the beginning, I didn't think that it was going to be a survey show, because it was simply a show I was going to curate for Devi Foundation. But then, for the reason that all the works were coming from the collection, their collection, part of the collection that they collected from Pakistan. So I realized that the expectation was actually going to be that of a national survey show, no matter whether I like it or not. So that is the challenge that I had to deal with.
Let's switch to Lahore itself for a moment and talk a bit about the current situation in Lahore, both at a political, social, and artistic level. And what is the environment in which this biennial will be created?
Well, as we know that 2 things are come to your mind when you think of Pakistan with regards to art. One is the phenomena of art, contemporary art from Pakistan. And as we know, in comparatively the other parts of South Asia, the academia, the one limb of the, we don't have a fully developed art infrastructure there, but one limb is overnourished in comparison to the other, so which is the art academia side. So between the art academia, strong art academia from Pakistan, and the phenomena of art, contemporary art from Pakistan, there is a void. So there is a need has been a need for Biennale. The city deserves an event of of that ambition and that scale, especially in the absence of any kind of institutional or governmental support. So, despite the problematics of what we can see with the format of Biennale, which has really proliferated in the last many years, I think still there are ways in which one can go about dealing with the Biennale, and in a way that you don't have to think, you don't have to try hard to make it different. I mean, one has to just realize the context under which it's taking place, and that's where the relevance lies.
So there's an important biennial now in Kochi, will be in its third iteration. There's the Sharjah Biennial, which has been going on for decades. There is the Dhaka Summit, which has been recently created. How will the Lahore Biennial fit in this ecosystem, and also how will it differentiate itself?
There are similarities in these metropolises, urban centers within South Asia and adjacent regions, but they have their peculiarities. They have their own characteristics. So it will be a new context, despite the similarities. And I would also like to, in my mind, as an artist, whenever possible, I like to defy political borders. So I would like to believe that if subcontinent has one Biennale going in the south, then we need one in the north. So I don't see it necessarily a Pakistani thing. It's a north subcontinent thing, and I think with Lahore, the kind of history it has, and what it has, the amazing minds that it has produced because of its non-linear sense or peculiarities and its histories. So as I said, that it will be. It will take on its own shape in relationship to these existing models that we have. Dhaka Art Summit, I think, is a very innovative new model. And by the virtue, even they're not even calling it a Biennale. And the way they're doing it in terms of their duration model and the contents that it includes. So similarly, I think though Lahore Biennale uses the label Biennale, but it will have something different to offer.
Well, I want to drill into that for a moment, because the implication of a biennale is continuity, that it has a rhythm. So you clearly had a choice to simply do a big exhibition that could have been done as a one-off, and maybe that might have catalyzed a subsequent iteration. But the choice is clearly to commit to this longue durée of. So give us a little bit of your thinking behind, or the thinking behind the founders of this biennial to this longer-term commitment. Why the biennial format?
Well, one-off exhibition, grand exhibition, is a problematic concept. There has to be element of sustainability, and that's what I think the foundation has in mind in terms of their core objectives. But to sustain it long term, one has to be flexible in terms of approach and ideas, to the extent that whatever the mission, I believe, this is my view, foundation can have their view, I can suggest that even the mission statements don't have to be reviewed 10 years period. They could be even reviewed every 2 years. So I think there is a problem with the two big event concept, and that's how we're approaching it. At least that is my vision, to not turn this exercise into a one big heroic act of having a large exhibition. It will have those characteristics, but there is more to it, to not restrict it to that.
We'll get into that in a moment, but tell us a little bit about the Lahore Biennial Foundation. What is it? Who is it? How is it structured, and what is its relationship specifically to the organization of the biennial?
Well, the good thing is, good and bad thing, that the people who initiated it were not strictly practicing artists. And so they bring a different perspective to it. They want to give a counter narrative to what has been going on, what for what the country and the city has been known outside Pakistan, the extremist sort of narrative, and so they wanted to give bring a counter narrative to that, and the idea is to take art. Well, there is no institutional or white cube space to begin with, so you can't say you're taking it out. So that's what all you have. So the idea is to engage a wider audience and to do projects around the year. So this is only one of the products. Already in last 2 years, they have undertaken several projects collaborating with various different government and non-governmental bodies.
And it's an entirely private foundation.
It is a private foundation. It's been initially founded by a group of artists. I was included, but then I specifically suggested them, don't keep any artists in your board, including myself. But they chased me to do this job, which I'm glad to do as a one-time thing.
So you say now. How will the biennial be organized? I realize it's a year away. Walk us through the kind of thinking that you're doing now, and tell us a little bit about how you imagine first the organization of the biennial, and then some of the projects that it will involve.
Well, intentionally, and you don't have a choice when you're doing things in a place like Pakistan. So you're doing everything in a new way, and you have to find a new method to it. So there is going to be a lot of learning for me, and I have to stay open to that. So I just have to come up with strategies which allow that kind of learning. So as I said, since we do not want it to be a big heroic exhibition as a Biennale, so the way I am imagining the curatorial process to unfold in 3 phases. The phase 1, and I will see things will be adjusted, and I will have to improvise. First phase is very significant to me, in which I would like that the curatorial premise does become part of a larger discourse. And it should not be the case that you, as a curator, I write a curatorial note, pass it on to the artist, they produce a work which is imported into Pakistan, you have your exhibition, opening, closing date, and that's it. So we would like that in the first phase, through a methodical process, which may involve another curator. I would like to engage more minds, and one curator entirely undertakes a project of floating this idea, making this into a larger debate, the curatorial premise that I'm working with, through symposium or something innovative in the same direction, and as well as using the cyberspace, the technology, the internet space to engage academia at various different places. So, I mean, the Biennale may be located in Lahore, but we would very much like it to transcend and escape the location. That's the idea. I mean, as one of the 2 key objectives is to make the event and all what comes with it to be extremely relevant to the thousands of citizens in the city of Lahore by making works visually as well as functionally accessible. But at the same time, it should not end up being a condescending exercise that, some people in the position of power taking some art to the masses, and that kind of stance has to be dealt with. So there are ways in which we are going to counter that. But having said that, it has to be relevant to the thousands of people, and then it should transcend that location, and at the same time has to contribute or be a part of the larger discourse of art anywhere in the world.
You're asking a lot of it.
If you start with asking a lot, you can end up with something.
And the underlying curatorial premise is?
Well, underlying curatorial premise is that what we see, the notion of art, the way it's practiced, it's a condition of history. And we are so set in our minds that it's so normal and final to make work for the sole purpose of creative expression, which seems like a way in a part of evolution, because you do not have to, in the last 150 years or so, one doesn't have to produce work for the state or for the church or for anybody. So that seems like the natural evolution and liberty, but that may well be, very well be a false, somewhat false perception too, because you do work under the larger umbrella of a political and economic system known as capitalism, and without calling it good or bad, the fact remains that, you know, whatever is defined under that. So I'm not saying Lahore Biennale is going to become such a huge factor to challenge such a huge thing, but one could take tiny steps to at least talk about possibilities. So this idea of, you know, having to produce, you know, art just for the sole purpose of creative expression, that's what I do also, and I think I'm very lucky to be born in this time. But I think, how about thinking and challenging it, what could be the function of art, even if it has to be the same, it has to be a chosen thing, rather than like a born in a religion, as opposed to being converted to something. So artists will have the freedom to interpret it in any way they want, but before that stage comes, as I said, as first part of the curatorial process, we would like the, as one of the pillars, one of the elements of the process, to initiate a dialogue. So people who are, many of the people who will be part of that dialogue, whether from the visual arts background or not, will have the potential to be become the participant for this exhibition as well.
And have you begun to assemble a curatorial team? Are there already sort of key figures that you're working with, and who would they be?
Well, no, I mean, still in the process, and the team, the way I'm going to work, there is going to be a team located in Lahore, because that's essential, but in this first phase, we would not mind having plenty of curatorial liaisons located anywhere in the world, so that we can carry out this dialogue process that I spoke about. Secondly, you know, in the same time, we're looking to do a methodical mapping of the location, the venue itself, city of Lahore, and for that in itself becomes a project. So another curator will look after that. So the way, you know, the process is unfolding, then this is how the team is going to be built. And then the third part is to do an extensive research, you know, around the practices which, because I'm not the only one thinking on those lines. There are practices out there which do coincide with this curatorial premise, and they do challenge the function of art, whether it's scientific function brought into art, or whether financial function brought into art. So there are practices, so there has to be an element of research. So this is how, around these goals, I'll have to develop the team.
The political situation in Pakistan is sufficiently charged and complicated that I wonder if you would talk about that a little bit more, and also address the question about whether there is art that could not be shown in Pakistan, that, and if there is, how are you going to deal with that?
Well, we have examples. We see, you know, art fairs flourishing in UAE, despite strict censorship. I hope now I'm not banned to go back to UAE at some point. So I think Pakistan may have less financial resources, but there are more things that you can show than one could show at Sharjah or Dubai. So yes, but there will be limitations, and artists in Pakistan have learned how to go about those limitations. Now it will be turn of our friends from outside Pakistan to come and experience that context and see how they deal with it.
And I'm actually very interested in this issue, because I think one of the collisions that can occur is driven really out of a high degree of naivete, especially on artists who are unfamiliar with local conditions. So obviously Pakistani artists have learned to navigate the politics of what they can and cannot do, and what they can and cannot do in public versus what they might do in private. But I think as you cast your web outside of that, how are artists unfamiliar with those codes going to learn them, and are you going to step in or parts of your curatorial team step in to say that's not going to fly here? I mean, is there a kind of gray zone of negotiation, or could you envision a situation where an artist says, "This is what I'm going to do," and that's how it's going
I'll
to be?
create buffer zone there. Well, it will be tricky, and it will not be very pleasant thing to because it's one thing to self-censor, it's one thing to know cheeky
Exactly.
creative ways, but it's a different thing to But as I said, that it's we have examples, we have models to study. I think sometimes someone visiting Pakistan, they try to be more cautious than they need to be. So I don't know if it'll come to me, come to the point where we will have to. I think it will maybe the other way around, where one may end up encouraging people that this wouldn't be a problem and this can be done, because I think by default artists coming from outside will be very sensitive to the situation, more than that they will require to be. But that's the phase 2 of the curatorial process, where there will be many discussions between the curatorial team and the participants involved. And as I said earlier, they don't have to be necessarily visual artists or practicing visual artists. And it will also be possible to the way the curate selection is going to take place, that people with creative inclinations from other fields, even sciences, may be collaborating or joining hands with people who we know as visual artists. So there will be, I think, this will be quite a fun phase, second phase, in which these discussions will be taking place, and there will be a curatorial team and the team of project managers which will be managing it. So we leave it to that phase. But I think if it comes to a very confrontational situation, that is yet to be seen.
Well, I hope it never comes to that. You talked about a biennial of the South and a biennial of the North, which I think is an interesting way of imagining this kind of complex relationship that exists in the subcontinent. But what I was struck by in Kochi was the real foregrounding of artists primarily from India. That's what gave it its texture, its interest, and the pleasures of discovery. Can you imagine the biennial in Lahore as being also foregrounded primarily in artists from the region, or do you see it as having a broader international mix?
Well, there is a bit of untold kind of a difference of opinion between me and Foundation here.
That's what we want to hear. Don't tell us the good stuff.
No. There is only written stuff. Nobody has dictated anything to me.
Yeah.
But it's time for me to discuss that. I would like it to be a much broader thing. It just excites me to imagine certain artists who I admire for their practice, imagining them to be dealing with the context in Lahore. That's what is going through my mind right now.
Have you already established sort of the key venues for the biennial? You talk about it being in the city, but will there be a principal location or?
It's a Biennale without walls, and as we keep on using the word Biennale, but I think in its characteristic features, it's not going to be like any Biennale. We do have examples of Biennales taking place that do use various multiple venues in the city, but venues are not going to be defined by the Biennale itself. The way artists have to approach this project, as I said earlier, about thinking and questioning function, so it is very likely that they may end up being in situations with other collaborators whose list we have to provide. Foundation has already worked with several individuals and institutions, public and private, who are willing to come on board, and they have something in offering from their organization or their resources, if those resources are required by the participants to come up with projects. So when we say function, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be as if art, attached with wheels and it'll just start running. Not functional in that sense, but I think the possibilities are immense in the sense that someone may come up with an idea that is a business and art idea at the same time. They both are inseparable. It could be serving a function in the city. So if city being an organism with several different social, financial, political, religious functions, if projects are not necessarily going to be planted into the city, but they could plug into the city. So in that sense, it will be up to the artist how they're going to make use of the city as not only as a site or a venue for the Biennale, but as well as a medium. It's, for example, one of the collaborator which we already know at this point, among many, is the water management organization. It's a government body in Lahore, and they control all the and deal with all the water, whether it's flowing into the canal or sewerage or the tap water. So imagine offering this to an artist as a medium, what you can do with it. So that's how the city are going to play its part in terms of a venue, not necessarily that we will identify 10 locations and you bring and you plant a work here. It will be more plugging into the functions, various functions of the city, realizing that there could be issues when you talk about, especially when the government institutions are involved, that when you're serving a function, when art starts serving a function, when the risk is that you can go back to the history where you are serving your function for somebody in the position of power. But this is where things get interesting now, because we have 150 years of another kind of practice behind. Artists have subversive tools and possibilities to how to take a different kind of position here, and while making something functional and yet not being subservient to any institution of power.
Let me push a little bit on that, because I was struck at the last Istanbul Biennial, which made a big effort to use the city and to even use the islands in the Sea of Marmara. And I found it actually a really unsatisfactory experience. Not that any one installation wasn't rewarding, but that it became very hard to hold the whole thing together in your mind when it took several days to visit each site. And sometimes you would go for a long period of time to get to a site, and the work wasn't that interesting, or it was a work that you understood very quickly. And in a good day, you might see 4 or 5 works, as opposed to the concentration that comes when things are clustered together. And so the challenge, I think, if you're talking about a dispersed program, is how does someone hold that together? And especially, how does an audience, if there will be one from abroad that might not spend weeks or months in Lahore, although personally that would be a really rewarding experience. How does one deal with that sense of dispersal and the texture that you might want?
Well, it's not geared towards actually art tourism. I have to confess that. Though we're not going to discourage that either, because there will be ways to make the concepts around the Biennale and different projects be accessible in various different forms, and they could be online portals, and they could be a centrality to the Biennale where some projects, some documentations are there. The Biennale, as I said, I mean, it has to transcend the location, but in another sense, it is really for the inhabitants to really experience that, by not thinking that one day they're going to a gallery or going to go and see an artwork or to going to a big exhibition. Because of it will have to be visually and functionally accessible. It will be part of life. There's a very thin line, as in comparison to what we're discussing about some of the examples that exist. It is not an attempt to just taking art to non-conventional space. It pushes the idea a little bit further. In the second phase, I think very close conversations will have to take place between curatorial team and the artist. And then this is why the first phase, in which we're spreading the dialogue, and in that will also unfold many other possibilities. There is a very, again, talking of thin line, we know the recipe to make wine, but we know that it can also very easily become vinegar. So I think this is where I think it gets tricky, but I think if half the projects become wine, I'll be happy with that.
Let me make sure that all of you have a chance to ask questions, because this is really meant to be a conversation and a dialogue with Rashid, and we'll turn at a certain moment as well to his own work. But if any of you, yes, I see a hand right. We're going to go up the ladder. You're first, and then there's somebody there, and then up there. But we'll start with this.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Rashid. It was beautiful, lovely talk and question. Actually, I can relate to your last question about the Istanbul Biennial, especially because I live between Istanbul and London. And I really want to expand on that question. In terms of education, what are you thinking of, how much of the Lahore Biennial will include workshops, performances? Are you thinking of including some of your students inside it? Can you expand on the educational program? And secondly, for young aspiring curators and artists, what would be your advice, especially for the curators and artists coming from a region of conflict, political conflict, not London, not New York, but from cities like Lahore or Istanbul? Thank you.
Well, I need advices from curators, not the other way around. We're thinking of set models, we're thinking of set expectations in terms of programming also. I think what we are set out to do, I think I'm certain that it will unfold into different kind of projects. I mean, imagine if there's a grocery store, which is done in a way that it's integral for some sort of artistic choices and aesthetic decisions, to make a statement which is maybe about branding, but by totally unbranding it. I'm just giving a very abstract example, and it's something which it's a normal grocery shop, but it's inseparable from the art idea that somebody may come up with, and that the way it is supposed to be run, it is an artistic choice also, hypothetically. Then people in the city are going and they're using it. Somebody offered us, after my talk in Dubai, that we have schools, this chain of schools in Pakistan, can we offer this as a place? So we are only going to offer this to the artists, that, okay, this is the institution, they have these many schools, and this is in the offering. They can offer you classrooms, they can offer you this, they can offer you the students. Then it's up to the creativity of the artist to think out of the box outside the studio, what can be the ideas that the function of education and the function of art, can they overlap, can they be inseparable? This is where the creative ideas will come into play. So it will be built in a feature. It will not be separated from that. So we hope that all these different kind of functions, through the help of these potential collaborators and the participants, they will open up new formats. We don't have to follow necessarily that Biennale has to have a seminar, has to have an educational program of a certain kind. I think the premise itself opens to many possibilities for those things to happening in the real way in the real city, rather than something which is outside of the city, though still located in the city.
There was a question, yes, sorry.
Hi, Glenn. Hi, Rashid.
Hi.
My question is pertaining to the Biennial. What are you thinking? There's a similar talk happening in Srinagar also. I was just talking to one of the founders who's thinking of the Srinagar Biennial, which is coming up in January 17. And they're thinking about the rhythmic structure in terms of a continuum mechanism. And what you talked about, they are considering the idea of extending nodes. So they have already thought of extending nodes to cities, including Basel, Ahmedabad, even Lahore and Chicago. And people are coming in to extend this idea of a non-structured space to carve a biennial. Is there any dialogue which has happened between those people and you, so that both Lahore and Srinagar, which are these very interesting sites where there are certain restrictions, how they could serve as new exciting models in the North Indian the subcontinent.
Well, it is great that more and more newer models are coming to the front. In the Salim sent me an email. He will be visiting Lahore, and I will have more to find out from him. So any overlaps, any kind of collaboration, intersections, interactions, all welcome.
I saw a question in the, yes.
Hi, Rashid.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you, Biennale sort of gives you the idea, it's based on an assumption that there's discourse. Now, in Pakistan, with a complete lack of discourse, how are you going to make this successful? It should not be about practice, it should be about ideas, and it should be about challenges, and it should be about engaging people. And I haven't heard you mention even once anything about Karachi artists. So I'm hoping it's going to be a little more inclusive. And if you can't even, and we sit here in Karachi and Lahore and we pat each other on the back and we say what wonderful work we're doing, and there is completely no discourse. There is no debate and no dialogue. And in that space, how are you going to be successful and take the idea away from people's practice and bring it into a dialogue?
I wouldn't say that there is no dialogue. Otherwise, all this interesting the work that is coming from the region wouldn't be possible. So dialogue does take in many forms. So I think let's not discount that. About the interaction, and as I said, that's precisely the agenda, to spread it, to expand it, and not even keep it to Karachi or Lahore artist, take it to a wider extent where a designer or a scientist or a writer or anybody can be part of it to draw these lines, and that is precisely the agenda. That's what I was trying to explain. The goal is not to have a one heroic sort of exhibition in Lahore, is to have generate a discourse that goes beyond Pakistan or Lahore or Karachi. That is the aim, and this is what I was explaining earlier, that hopefully we will use different means apart from the physically located, symposium or something of that sort in Pakistan initially in this first phase. We would like that the people who will come on board from other places, not just Pakistan, are going to engage with the academia in other places. There are now, because of technology, there are facilities that one could extend the dialogue through economical means. So that is one of the first things that I explained earlier.
But let's keep pushing on that a little bit, because I think it's an important question about how will you measure success? What, if we're now 2018 and we're back here and we're in front of an audience and we're having a conversation about the Lahore Biennial, how will you define whether it was successful? What will you look to
If it's engaged by the thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in Lahore, and if it's talked about as many outside Lahore, that will be the success.
So then
whether they hate it or love it.
That's okay. So I want to come back to the outside Lahore, because I understand how you will root this in the texture of the city. It will undoubtedly respond and react to the conventions of the city. But you've ruled out art tourism as an interest of yours. But you want it to be reacted to by hundreds of thousands of people outside Lahore. So how are you going to engage those people if you're not actually interested in accommodating them by creating a biennial they can actually see? What's the strategy?
Let me clarify. I'm not against art tourism. I just don't want it to be the sole purpose of the Biennale. Mm-hmm. That's all. They will be, I'm sure, foundation. Some of the members of foundation are sitting here. They will.
They're tearing their hair out. You can identify the members of the foundation.
There will be ways in which we find a lot of curiosity and interest, and we're hopeful that there will be still art tourism there. But I don't want it to be the basis for the curatorial premise. That's my position. And I think, as I keep on repeating that the goal is not to discuss the curatorial premise just with the selected artists. The goal is to initiate the dialogue first and then see how the participants are becoming part of it. Because not only I will have, with the help of my curatorial team, will select the artist or participants, it will be made open to anybody who has been part of these discussions in the next 10 years, 10 months. They feel compelled to suggest something or propose something that is suitable for this project, so they could propose this. So this is open for anybody. Karachi walon ke liye bhi.
Other questions? Yes, right here. There's a microphone coming down.
First off, Rashid, thanks a lot for advancing the Pakistani cause. I think it's indicative with the diversity I see in the room and the fact that it was quite a struggle for me to get tickets and the seat over here. So, with that said, I wanted to go towards the funding of this event. That how do you plan to do that? And like all things in Pakistan, it's very driven by corporate and branding aspects. Would you embrace that, for example, if Coke wants to do some sort of artistic installation, or would you shy away from something like that?
No, not at all. So we're not going to sit on the periphery and call everybody bad. So let everybody be part of it, and then see where they can take it. So it's going to be up to the artists / participants to see whether they can, bite the very hand that feed them. So subversion will come into play. So, but we as an organization, or as me as a curator, we're open to anybody wanting to be a participant or a collaborator or a sponsor. So it's open for all. As I said, it's a Biennale without walls, not just in the physical sense, in conceptual sense too.
There are two questions there. I see the hand in the middle there. Yes, you with the keys or whatever you were holding. Sorry, from here I can't see faces, so I can just see the arms.
Hi, Rashid.
And there's another question behind you. But please.
As an artist, you're losing studio time to this project. Perhaps you see them as tightly connected, or perhaps you're kind of missing that time, and I'd be interested to know like how you're thinking about that.
We're back to the first question, and I won't refer my wife this time, but I have beginning to believe, and I actually truly believe that I don't draw actually lines if I'm making curriculum, making art, or making exhibition. So they're all forms of production. So in this given phase, if I've been trusted with this responsibility, so I see it as a form of creation. It's a learning, because when you're involved in your own studio in an artistic practice, it's just one mind into play. And when you're working for in a curatorial position, then so many minds are coming together, and that extends. It allows a different kind of view of contemporaneity. It almost stretches the moment almost. Anyway, I'll go back to production again. That is artistic production, strict sense. But before that, the reason I'm going to hand over all of these different aspects of the first phase of curatorial project, because I have already commitments with my galleries and some other projects, a collaboration with Wayne McGregor for the London Opera House and some other projects. So this year, for next 12 months, you will see me operating as an artist still. But I will take leave for 9 months to do the Biennale.
Yeah. In the far back, I saw that there was a hand. Yes.
Rashid, welcome to the United States. And for me, this evening, like a cultural revolution, because Pakistan was associated mostly with violence, with terrorism, with some kind of hiding place for Ibn Laden, and I'm glad to hear about arts, because probably somebody said that when arts are talking, war is stopping. What I'm wondering, among your students, among your colleagues, how many of them were able to read of radicalism, terroristic thoughts or violent thoughts because they use arts, and for them it was like art therapy. And I'm wondering how you can reform your country and to stabilize your country culture through the introduction arts since maybe grammar school. Thank you.
A very easy task. I'm sure you can do this simply.
Well, it could have been an easier task if some of the powers in the world had not spent trillions of dollars towards war on terror. Had they used that money to open art schools or colleges in Pakistan, so things would have been different. I'm telling you this from my own experience. I grew up as a very religious teenager. I could have gone into any sort of directions till I ended up in art school.
You've come a long way.
I truly believe in the power of art, and I think that is specifically on the minds of people, or the founders of the foundation, and that's precisely the goal, as you have stated. So this is how we're going to play our part and our share in changing the situation and taking the narrative away.
To pick up on that a little bit, and to sort of expand it into a more social context, the Lahore Biennial will exist alongside with the Lahore Literary Festival. And together, and perhaps with other initiatives in Lahore, they become part of a kind of semi-official effort at civil society, right? In a country where many of the political systems are either frayed, or some might even say occasionally failed, it turns to other forms of social practices to provide structure for people. And so I just wonder how you imagine the relationship with the Literary Festival and other parallel initiatives that exist outside the frame of formal institutions.
Already there have been collaborations between the foundation and LLF, Lahore, for those Lahore Literature Festival, and they have done wonderful work for last 3 years. And it's been heartening to see. We didn't know, Lahoris are not known so much for reading. I mean, that's the perception. Karachiites are more of, so literary sort. So KLF, Karachi Literary Festival, started first, and it's a major event for the civil society. So when it started in Lahore Literature Festival, it was so heartening to see, crowd pouring in thousands of numbers, queuing up in the city of Lahore, where we only see these queues outside, desi restaurants. So this was a, game changer. I mean, and think Lahore Literature Festival is a natural, partner in this, and they will be contributing to this venture we call Lahore Biennale 2017.
Yes, right there in the middle. Yes, you. Sorry, your microphone is coming. Now, did you have a question? Thanks.
Hi, my name's Miso. You mentioned that art is a historic, art has a historic condition. And given the history of biennales in Europe, like the Venice Biennale, how do you think Western perspective will shape or contribute to your biennale?
Already, I don't know if I understood the question correctly. If we, in the strict sense of East or West, though it took me 20 years to move away from East-West dichotomy, but going back to it, the concept came from a country located in the West, Venice Biennale, as you mentioned. And since then it has evolved. It's like, but it can go into other parts of the world if cars and other products can be exported or imported. So these concepts, but then they can be customized and they can develop and take on new forms and new meanings, new associations. And that's what will happen, as our friend mentioned about the experimental format of the Srinagar Biennale and Kochi we have seen, and Dhaka Art Summit is a different model. So these are like, it's interesting to see how things that originate in one part of the world, how they evolve and develop in the other.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm just admiring this booklet and the very beautifully written manifesto, which is, very wide. The Lahore Biennale is not spatially limited, and it's not chronologically limited, and it's very dispersed, and yet it's called the Lahore Biennale. And assuming that that's more than just a marketing kind of ploy, it must have some conceptual point. And I wonder how you've described further to this, and in line with this, the breadth, the vision, which is really fascinating. So what does it mean conceptually as a curator to then pull this back into something that's called the Lahore Biennale?
Yeah, it is paradoxical. It's now I've come on board as a curator, so I don't have a choice. So yes, it's but it is going back to the mission statement. I mean, it's even possible that artists could propose projects in such a way that they may not be taking place even in Lahore. Even we're that open to the possibilities. Maybe something else taking place somewhere, and its aftermath is being shown in Lahore, or vice versa. So I mean, as an artist, you know that I experience. I mean, for me the drive was that for the Venice project, transpositions as part of my East to West. Somehow I thought that as an artist, as a contemporary artist, you're always in exile, being in Pakistan. So how do I deal with that? And this question had been on my mind, and it led to thinking and bringing Lahore audience into Venice. So I'm sure creativity has no limits in artists if they're given this openness and open, situation where they could propose projects which may even not be physically located, but ideologically I do see a point that is maybe the limitation, and there is the paradox that it will be seen as associated with the name, with the geography. So it will, it can only be countered by transcending location in various different ways.
Yes, with the red pencil.
Hi, I wanted to ask again in the continuum after having all the questions and all the questions being answered. Obviously, in such a structure which is still being shaped up, what kind of curbing, because obviously there are like too many cooks can literally spoil the broth. What the Biennial, you guys as a foundation, where would you be putting the full stops? Where would you let the full stop go open into open sentences? How these decisions would come up, because I know it's like it's easy to propose that things will happen in a different city, but who will see it? How we will see that? How internet, or which behaves very differently in the Indian subcontinent compared to the 5G networks in this country. Those disparities, those are I think also the pivotal challenges in terms of like binding the Biennial. What is your take on those points? I know like we're talking hypothetically right now, and my question too is like a hypothetical because it will react to a
Yes, it
situation.
is highly hypothetical because sentence hasn't even started, and we're thinking about full stops.
Yes.
But having said that, I think you've answered the question yourself, that the internet doesn't even work properly. So I wouldn't have to put stop to many things. I think there'll be situations that will, help artists find their way in different way.
Other questions in the back? Yes.
Hi, Rashid. I don't know if you can see me. This is your pal, Sonia from New Delhi. You and I, we both come from highly patriarchal places, to put it very mildly. And assuming that these kind of conversations are for you ways in which will help shape the Biennale, here I'm being proactive and citing a small example from what happened with the first Kochi Biennale. There was all of 7 women in the first Kochi Biennale, and during the conversation which followed during the Biennale and after, the organizers found themselves having to duck and defend and explain why that was so. That's all I have to say.
So it's a warning.
Yes, in the very far back.
Hi, Rana. Just a quick question. I mean, you've talked about the openness and there not be any walls, etc., and sort of everything's out there. How does it? Have you guys thought about the security aspect of things? I mean, how are you actually gonna? We're all from Pakistan. We know things are. It's hard to pull some of these things off, especially what's happened in Lahore recently. And what are you guys planning on doing on that front?
The question came a bit late. I was expecting it much sooner. We live in Lahore, and that's where we live. And things happen, and we have built this resilience. Sadly, we have built insensitivity as well. But that's how the situation is. This is why I think it's even more important that the discussion and discourse around it, expands and goes viral, even if people are not coming there. So I cannot predict if something happens down the road, some incident, then Biennale will still take place. And it's already on my mind, and we, in the second phase, as I mentioned, of the curatorial process, where we're going to have close discussions with the artist involving the larger curatorial and project management team. We will look into ways where, for one, not big exports and imports have to take place. Also, where artists, if they decide not to come, for any kind of reason or security concerns, things could take place. So we will take preemptive measures. As far as we're concerned, we will still be there.
Rashid, how many artists do you imagine participating in the biennial?
We have 50 projects in mind, but this number is really relative. It could really change. Looking at, especially, I think things can get really interesting based on the proposals that we're going to receive. That's what I'm banking on. That's where my interest lies, because I will have to select few usual suspects on the basis of the quality of the work, the Son of the Stars, and then put them in this context. And hypothetically, I'm not saying that I've selected Tino or asked him or if he has agreed, but imagine if Tino Segal has to. He doesn't even travel. He doesn't even have to travel anywhere.
It's a very long way for him to come.
No, he doesn't travel, as you know. And he gives a set of conditions. Suppose he has to construct his situations in Lahore, in that context, what would it result to? It's fascinating for me to think. So, but then apart from the selected artist, as I said, it's open to anybody to submit projects. And if the projects are not necessarily financially or logistically a constraint, so we are open to increasing the number of projects. Who knows, maybe 50 young artists or young scientists from Lahore, they say that we want to do this thing. So I'm not going to be looking at total number of artists. I will see what they're bringing to the Biennale and what number of projects we can, with our capacity can deal with.
You cited so far a couple of examples, the hypothetical intervention in the grocery store,
Right.
Tino Segal. Both of those are deeply performative events. Is this going to be a biennial that leans heavily on performance by definition because it's intervening with different organizations, or will it contain could you imagine it containing more traditional, traditional's not even the right word, paintings, photography, sort of very spatially specific works of art?
Well, basically practices existing or the new ones that people will propose have to revolve around the idea of function. So I'm going to actually, for myself, when these discussions are taking place in the next few months, going to take a fresh look at works which have been produced in the past, and then maybe some of those works, disregarding time and location, may fit very well into this context. So I think I am not set on anything whether it's going to be a certain kind of artist. And when I gave the grocery store example, it's not. This is the key point. It's not that there's an grocery store there and somebody will have to come and intervene and change that thing. And so it's not so much interventional as much as in conception. People have to come up with ideas which may be inseparable with its function that they've chosen. But it's interesting that you mentioned the performance aspect, because in one sense it is performative by virtue of the way it will be taking place in the city, as part of the city.
Yes, with the red jacket.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I just had like a question which I'm sure you've thought about before, but did Lahore need a biennale beside the logic of kind of a market economic logic? In a sense, what I'm trying to ask is it an exercise of mimesis and alterity towards the way the Western biennales have been organized? And or is it an exercise to prove something, and to whom then? I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say.
Not really.
Like, what is it? Who needs a biennale? At a very basic level, and why?
This must be your wife's cousin.
A writer, without quoting the name, forgot. So somebody asked, "Who's your audience?" And he said, "Whoever reads my novels." So whoever is going to, going to consume or view or engage with this biennale, it is going to be for them.
But let's push on that a little bit, because many biennials have very specific reasons for coming into being, right? And it's not just Venice and Documenta that were each in its own way about affirming a kind of national identity, or about civic boosterism, or other biennials that are about economic development, or other biennials that are about demonstrating artistic prowess, or about bringing an artistic community from abroad to a local audience. So there has to be, the biennial is surely more than just for anybody who comes to the biennial. It has to have some underpinning, something you're trying to prove, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I thought we had spoken about those aspects, that the goals of the foundation, the mission statement.
But something deeper. I want to push deeper than that. What is it that when you decided to create the Biennial Foundation before you became its curator, way back in its neonatal stage, what is it that compelled you to want to do this, and your colleagues to want to come together and make a biennial?
I truly believe that the city deserves better. Apart from, as I mentioned, the phenomena of art that is being produced, and you go and you get opportunities and exhibit anywhere, there has to be something taking place in that city itself, which has a rich history. But not to replicate any model and find Lahore should also have a MoMA, Lahore should also. So, I mean, it's a very different context. There's something I want to read, and I'm not finding any question to, any moment. So I'm just going to force this into it.
Perfect. The floor is yours.
This is, Lahore is, those who know, those who visited, those who haven't, it's a different context. Even if it's a model that has been invented or practiced elsewhere, it's going to take a fresh look. It's going to, only if you give it a chance. And that's all I'm trying to do, to give it as a chance to imagine or to evolve into something what it could become in that context. And that context I'm going to read. And this is in the words of Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh. I also talk about, I have similar views. I often say in my talks that, Lahore is a place where you would find, 3,000 years old design chariot on a latest Mercedes-Benz on the same road. And there's a sense of time is totally non-linear. And how beautifully the same thing has been said by Ghulam Sheikh, an artist, modernist artist, legendary artist and educator from India, 3 decades ago. So he says, living in India means living simultaneously in several times and cultures. One often walks into medieval situations and runs into primitive people. The past exists as a living entity alongside the present, each illuminating and sustaining the other. As times and cultures converge, the citadels of purism explode. Traditional and modern, private and public, the inside and the outside are being continually splintered and reunited. So we have yet to see how the Biennale format will take place in Lahore.
And I think that is a wonderful way of bringing this conversation to a close. Please salute Rashid Rana, a great artist. A great artist, a great curator, and a great biennial director, for sure.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you all.